Welcome to another episode of Let's Create a Healing Temple of the Cosmic Powerhouse. Today it is all about mental health and well-being, and I'm very happy and feel honored to have an absolute expert here. Hello, Dr. Kamran Fallahpour from New York.
Hello,
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And yeah, as it is about mental health, and some of our listeners might already know, I always start to create a sacred space and do some earthing to go out of the mind and have a bit more grounded spirit here, that we are all be able to attentively listening what Dr. Fallahpour has to tell us. So if you want to join us, then please fold your hands in front of your chest and bring them up towards the sky and bring it aside to yourself to create an energy bubble, an energy field. So take a deep inhale. And then bring your hands to the side, create this energy bubble where all your information is stored. And I bring it over you, over the audience, that we can include you in the high vibrational energy of the cosmic powerhouse. And then we take a deep breath 3 times so that we are grounded. So take a deep inhale and out. And in and out. And last time. In and out. And grow deep roots into the earth to ground yourself. Okay, and today we will hear more about other alternatives, how we can ground ourselves and come into a different brainwave state. So I'm very happy to have you here, Dr. Fallahpour.
Thank you.
Such a lot of experience in clinical psychology and neuroscience. And yeah, you are the founder and director of the Brain Research Center and the founder and CSO of Vital Neuro. I looked at it and it's very exciting, and we will go into that later on, that you hopefully will tell us what it is about and how it works. So it really sounds very fascinating. Stick to us, dear audience. There's some really very interesting AI-driven technology coming to us. Yeah, so your work is published in many expert journals, and I also saw there that you contributed to a book where I would like to hear more about. It is called The Warrior to Civilian. So maybe you also want to tell us shortly about that later on. Before we go into that questions, of course, our audience would like to know, well, where did it start? So how did your journey start to the area of mental health? I can imagine that was some kind of regular start in the clinical psychology and it developed over time, but maybe there was also something in your life story where, yeah, there was an initial moment where it started. Please tell us a bit more about you and your personal story.
Of course. So firstly, thanks for inviting me. So if I really want to go back to where it all started for me, I would say that, and I think I shared this with you earlier on, is that life sometimes puts you on a trajectory that's most unexpected. So I was not in any way planning to be a neuroscientist or a psychologist. In fact, I was gravitating more towards, I would say, architecture and other kind of disciplines in my youth. And I had an experience where originally Persian or Iranian, and after the revolution in Iran, I migrated as a refugee. I lived in Spain for about 3-4 months as a refugee and then migrated to United States. And when I was in Spain in that period, I lived with a bunch of people around my age, some older, some younger, and all kind of being refugees and being in a very difficult situation in terms of having left their home country and not being able to go to their final destination and being basically without family support and resources. So one of the things that happened, naturally, they gravitated towards, I guess, wanting to talk to me. And I became kind of the surrogate therapist for that small community. And music was involved because I was also playing music, played the guitar a bit. And So out of that first experience, I guess was my first experience as a therapist or someone who would help with mental health and well-being of others. Although I was in a similar situation, but it just happened to unfold that way. And then later on, when I moved to United States and started my studies, because of my interest in the brain and human nature and human psychology, I ended up studying clinical psychology with more emphasis on neuroscience and neurophysiology, and ended up basically starting a career that I would say is perhaps a bit different from an average psychologist or even neuroscientist, because normally when you start as a psychologist, you become a therapist, you study and you become a therapist, or you go to other aspects of research and you end up being either a researcher or a clinician. And I was in a way privileged to be able to integrate these two worlds and do neuroscience research, neurophysiology, a lot of, I would say, R&D, research development in the areas of brain-computer interface, brain mapping, and so on, and integrated what neuroscience offered into my clinical practice to have that kind of balance between what research finds and what is applicable to what we call applied neuroscience, meaning that what can we take from the research, latest state-of-the-art research, and apply it to helping people today, patients today.
Yeah. Absolutely optimal, no? So that is what we actually need, that we have right away the bridge and see how it works and what we need maybe more in research, right?
Absolutely. So that's kind of where it kind of unfolded. And again, as my experience, even in my years of attending college, California State University, and then later on I moved to New York, NYU, and the Fielding Institute, as an undergraduate student, I also worked as a music therapist for people with all kinds of developmental and mental disorders. And it was an early experience, and I didn't think much of it at that time, although I found it to be very helpful. But then later on, I'll explain to you how it actually came full circle, because when I started working with the brain and when I started working with neuroscience, we did a lot of brain mapping. We did a lot of exploration of how through neurofeedback, you can actually not only monitor, but also affect and impact brain activity, various frequencies, various brain states, and shift human consciousness from one level to another. I also realized, well, there are lots of synergies between that and music, because music is also all about frequencies, and the two co-vary in some ways. And some scientists and some other people claim actually the universe is built and has emerged from frequencies and
Absolutely.
the Big Bang, so to speak. And whether that's true or not, what I can see in my work, at least, is that there are parallels and there are layers of impact that are interwoven between modulation, sound, frequencies, music, the brain, and other aspects of our physiology that all have rhythms, from our respiration to heart rate to other aspects of circadian rhythm. So they all kind of encompass this interconnected web of vibrations and frequencies that are not in a way kind of new age-ish of like some far concept that's abstract. It's very, very much grounded in physics and psychoacoustics and human physiology and neurons firing and so on.
Yeah, so that's very much the core of life, no? So yes. Core of life and creation. So
absolutely.
That's wonderful that you're talking about that, because our show is also meant to bring in people more aware about the deep truths of the cosmos and universal laws and what is actually the foundation of life and creation. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's been kind of my journey. And then later on, I started the Brain Resource Center, which is my brain health clinic, and where we do a lot of both assessments and treatments with people who have all kinds of disorders, from ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, bipolar, brain injury, stroke, insomnia, to people who are just interested in the brain, peak performance, longevity, and they're just interested to learn more about what this being is about and how these aspects of our brain function and brain dynamics interact with our cognition, with our personality, with our experience in life. And how can you modulate that and regulate that to enhance basically one's experience in life?
Yeah. So there's a lot of nowadays ADHD and neurodivergent discussion going around also in social media. So many people say, yeah, I'm neurodivergent. For me, it feels even like a trend here to say, yeah, if you're not streamlined, have streamlined behavior here, you're neurodivergent. So for me, actually, it feels a bit strange because, yeah, I feel myself as an awakened starseed, or I also know. And I have some psychic gifts, which are wonderful, but it's also not that easy to live in life in that world with that. So it's also challenging. But for me, it's just me. It's my personality. It's my what I bring as a soul here on the planet with my soul gifts. And I would not label it with some diagnosis or something. So what are you thinking about that?
I kind of agree with you. In my work, obviously, as a clinical psychologist who has to give diagnosis and has to kind of bring these clusters of symptoms or experiences under an umbrella, I always tell my patients that I'm not personally interested in a label. The diagnosis doesn't matter. In a way, it matters because clinicians need to interact, communicate with one another. Yeah, it's a system of quick and efficient communication about a cluster of symptoms. But in reality, each human being is individual, cognitively, psychologically, personality-wise. So we don't want to limit someone to a label of, oh, you're ADD and you're bipolar, and the reality is that I almost never see one diagnosis in isolation. One has, let's say, ADD, but also has a bit of anxiety or has depression or has some other kind of stream of personality and cognitive temperaments that makes that person unique. And to your point, the label of neurodivergent, it has become kind of fashionable. And in a way, people say, oh, I'm neurodivergent. We're all neurodivergent. And, everybody is unique.
Like you say, we are individual souls, so we have different kind of gifts.
Yes, but I guess it has some utility in some circles to communicate that don't expect what the norm basically represents from this person. They may have some gifts and they may have some liabilities that, for instance, someone with ADHD today in our society, let's say in school, it would be very difficult for them to fit in because they need to sit in an environment where it's limited, it's structured in some ways that it doesn't fit their physiological impulses at the moment. But in a hunter-gatherer society, they'll be the leaders of that society because those skill sets and temperaments will be much more useful, let's say, in that kind of environment. So I guess what I'm saying is that, throughout our culture, society, and where we are in evolution of human physiology and consciousness, these become disorders or they may be strengths depending on where we are.
Yeah, I feel it's sometimes really because, of course, not everybody can easily deal with that. So we are used to have the system, we have that conditioning, and it takes us a long time. So at least also me, a long time to find my soul gifts, to find my soul connection, and to accept it and live that authentic life, like now here with the podcast as well. And talking about that easily, but not everybody can do that because every individual is on the journey in a different kind of phase, a point in their journey, and it is okay. So like you say, we need some labels because we have a system running and we need to make it practical. But on the other hand, it is, I think for society, for the individuals, it's important to learn how to deal with it, right? How do I take this? That I don't identify with a label, with a diagnosis. I see it is something is described like this or that, but I am who I am. So I don't identify and actually be
Absolutely.
that, because then we
That's very
have
important.
very much challenge that I come not out of this circle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what you're saying is very important. Also, first of all, for individuals not to become their diagnosis, because
Exactly.
the human existence and dynamic is much vaster than that. At the same time, being aware of one's own tendencies and in some cases, transcending one's limitations obviously is the hallmark of human development. So one of the things we do in our work and practice is, let's say if someone, and by the way, I work with a lot of children and adults with, let's say, ADHD. Yeah, they have some issues around attention, focus, executive functions, impulse control, sometimes other aspects, but they're also very brilliant. They are actually gifted in some areas where other people are not as gifted. And what we do is to teach their nervous system and their brain to based on brain plasticity and the work we do, brain training. We teach how to basically expand and become more flexible. So if they need to pay attention, they can, but they don't lose their gifts of being creative or being kind of a divergent thinker and so on. So it's really about the ability to add flexibility and the ability to move from state to state rather than just saying, oh, this is wrong, let's change you in some ways.
Yeah, and that is fabulous, because that is what I feel is needed in the world to accept this individuality, and that we all learn in all the different areas to, how to handle that, right? How can we go through
Absolutely.
life from childhood on to use our gifts, but also to be able to align in the different situation to the things and have the right brainwave state and focus. And we have different kind of devices which also support us, but first of all, I think it's really ourselves, and so we also come to that point of, we were talking already about a bit more the spiritual side, the soul. So how do you see that? Can we more incorporate that spirituality area and also our soul in all that medical and physician work?
I think it's a very important question. I think in order for me to have an opinion on it, we need to define what spirituality means, because it has become one of those terms that means so many different things to so many different people. I want to tell you about maybe two layers or two aspects that at least I incorporate that into my work, is that one of the key questions I ask my clients during my clinical intake or interview is the question of meaning. How do they make sense of their own existence, their life, and what the meaning of that is? And some people basically don't have the capacity to kind of really delve into that. And for some people, really, it opens up a whole new world of exploration. And I think that's very important, at least to assess and see if a client person has the capacity, the need, the impulse to really explore that. So that's one layer. The other layer that I want to talk about is the idea that really we have various layers of reality transimposed on one another. We have a physical reality that we obviously can see and touch, and it's our physiology and it's our brain activity, as our heart, is our circadian rhythm. It's all about the physical attributes of the world. Very tangible, we can all relate to that. I would say that, and I've talked about this a lot, maybe around the time of Freud and Jung, Carl Jung, who's a great Swiss psychiatrist. And Freud came with the idea that aside from that, then this physical reality, there is another layer of psychodynamic reality that is unconscious, subconscious or unconscious. In other words, we have this physical reality, now that we have this subconscious and unconscious reality that are superimposed. In other words, there are meanings that are superimposed on one another. As you and I are interacting, there is another layer of subconscious processing that's going on. And there's
Yeah.
another layer of unconscious processing that's going on that is not necessarily ruling our physical interaction, but it's interwoven with it.
Yeah, some say it's the elephant and the ant, right? From the size.
Yes, absolutely.
So the unconscious is really big.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, add to that the social sciences and the society, and there's a social dynamic that's going on. That's our political, that's the kind of the era we're in as human beings, technology, where the planet is. All of these realities also interact with our physical being, but also the layers of subconscious and unconscious layer. So some people believe that yet there is another layer that's superimposed that is even beyond the subconscious, that, for the lack of terminology, it's what they call the spiritual realm. I don't know exactly what that means.
So I speak about metaphysical, non-physical, which is
right.
The big field or larger consciousness system, like behind everything.
Yes, yes. And that's where we get to many kind of discussions and other phenomena such as quantum mechanics, and how there are other rules that kind of defy the physical rules that we're familiar with, that is interacting at the micro and macro level. They're interacting and are a part of our reality, whether we are always conscious of them or not. But there is a dynamic that's going on between those.
Yeah, so people are more and more feeling that there's something else, right? And there's astrologers who are talking about that. There's much more information going around. So of course, I myself have my experience. So it's not only belief, but it's real experience. But don't want to go too deep into that, because that's really some special field, maybe for a special episode. But thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
The bridge that our audience can just grab it, because there's a lot of talk outside, and just to see where it fits in, right?
Absolutely. And to your point about there is, all this talk, as a neuroscientist, as a scientist, I think one needs to remain open to those questions and to those kinds of explorations. And the fact that it is a part of human experience, no matter how we label it, it is a part of a human experience. Now, the problem is there is so much noise out there that it is very difficult to detect the signal in the noise.
I agree.
So that's why a lot of scientists prefer just to kind of say, you know what, I don't want to even hear about it.
Yeah. But actually, I did my shamanic education at the Foreign Society with Dr. Alberto Vio. He comes from neuroscience. So it was, for me, very interesting then to study here shamanism and go back to that. And I like his connections. So making connections to the neuroscience area and what the shamans know for more than 50,000 years, right? So dream the world into being with the quantum field. So now we have it, a modern topic, talking about the quantum field and quantum jumping, and shamans are smiling. They're, yeah, that's just what we do.
Yes, again, looking at human history, shamans, I guess they were for that time, they were the medicine man and the therapist of the time. Now we have modern shamans, and it's labeled differently.
Future medicine woman.
Absolutely. I kind of want to say almost like we have all seen glimpses of another reality. All this talk about mental health, the brain, consciousness, shamanism, spirituality, all of that. Again, there's so much noise that it's hard to say where the signal is, but there's got to be some reality that is detectable, and eventually science can kind of zero in on it and describe it better. But as it is today, it becomes a lot of noise, obviously, even though there are realities there that one cannot deny in terms of human experience.
Yeah, it's that's also my experience on my journey, personal transformational journey, and coming back to my shamanic soul and healer soul, and also in the spiritual area. You can, from my experience, you can only feel into the things. So you feel the vibration of people, you feel the energy of people, because you can read information. They can tell you anything and write anything, but the truth lies in the vibration. The truth lies in the energies. And that was my compass and is. So my heart and my energy and the feeling for it is actually a better compass than reading a lot of descriptions about the people or their courses or so on. And it is not easy, because to come into that, to have that ability to really feel, truly feel, is that we maybe need to, work on that firstly. Right?
Absolutely.
It's really difficult to have that intuition and have the feeling coming back to your expert area.
Exactly. So to your point, I want to kind of go back to what Daniel Kahneman had stated about we only have our intuitions about it. I think as neuroscientists, scientists, or as individuals, we need to really remain kind of, I guess, I don't want to say modest, but we need to be realistic about the fact that we just don't know. We have intuitions about the aspects of reality we can detect and touch and experience, but in reality, we really don't know. And we have theories, we have stories, we have even things we can experiment and get positive results, and they seem all correct. But at the end of the day, there's lots of distortions and lots of noise in any data and any interpretation that we have of ourselves, observing other human beings, observing the universe. And, the fact that I often say that there are infinite ways to interpret reality and data. And I think, again, there are lots of ways to interpret the same data, the same reality, the same experience. And I think that we need to kind of stay sober about that all we have is our current theories and they make sense today. But 10 years from now, all of those are in the garbage bag.
It's a good point what you're saying. It's also sometimes I really write it in my posts. That is what I experience with my consciousness level, what I describe here. You might not feel or see the same. That is also what we learn in society now, that we really have a very individual experience, how our world is right now. But we also learn that we really can change things for ourselves. But coming back to the point, what you were saying, things we just don't know and need to see. So for me, the most important point is, and that's described in all the cultural traditions for thousands of years, it's just the work with yourself. So my belief is our bodies really like to see as a temple, right? So that's why
Absolutely.
And it is about me, and no one else can do it. It's about me to care about my body, mind, and soul in responsibility and see that this vessel for my soul is perfectly functioning, it's healthy, right?
Absolutely. And I want to maybe connect this to something you had asked earlier about stress and, some of the work we do at our clinic, but also with Vital Neuro, of why are we focusing on stress so much? Because to your point, one of the greatest distortions in our ability to perceive reality and to really elevate our consciousness, in my opinion, is chronic stress. When we are stressed physiologically, it really impacts not only our physical health, but also psychological health and beyond, to your point, maybe even our spiritual health, because we become distorted and overreactive to situations at a physiological level, and also psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, all of those. So one of the things that we also know is that the concept that almost every major psychiatric disorder is triggered by a stress response. When you think about it, from any kind of psychiatric breakdown, anxiety disorders, even psychotic disorders, PTSD, there is a stress response, and stress is involved in the environment. Even though many people have the genes, if the environment doesn't introduce the stressors, or if you have coping mechanisms, how to deal with those stressors, that psychiatric disorder, that gene will not express itself fully. So that's why it's so important to deal with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you what is the biggest trigger or impact on that. So thank you for telling us. So when you are going on the spiritual path and you are highly sensitive at some point, you're really stressed by the lots of noise because you're so sensitive. It's just you need to learn how to deal with that as well. So what is your personal strategy to have a better life and can deal with this because you cannot change the world around you a little bit.
Absolutely.
Own
Right.
way to how to deal with it, right? But what I wanted to say is, isn't that all also coming from unresolved trauma? We hear a lot about trauma and also on the vagus nerve theory.
Yes.
So isn't that all because we have trauma so much in our society globally? Everybody has somewhat in the generations before experienced difficult time, stressful time. So everybody has somewhat experienced trauma, I would say. So what is your experience with that?
Absolutely. And I've treated a lot of patients with trauma, with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I agree. I also have observed the fact that there are acute traumas and there are chronic traumas. And there are also in our life and society today, what I call micro traumas. Is like every moment we are bombarded by these mini traumas that happen, which part of it is our own interpretation of the world, the reality, relationships, and so on. But also the fact remains that there is a huge underpinning there, that there's a good part of that that has to do with also genetic factors, that some people are just more prone to anxiety, to trauma, and so on. And some people have a little bit more resiliency, which is important. Which is, again, the center somehow of some of the work we do. The work I've done here at the Brain Resource Center with clinical patients, and then later on with Vital Neuro. So what happened really in my practice for the past 20 some years, I've observed people from all walks of life with various disorders, a lot of them stress related, but stress, PTSD, anxiety, depression, ADHD, stroke, brain injury, and so on, who we did brain assessment, brain mapping, and treatment, and we've seen life-changing improvements in them. But my thinking about this was that, okay, I have a clinic in a kind of a boutique clinic in an affluent part of New York City. This is touching a fraction of even New York City. It's a small number of people we can help in this way. So about 7-8 years ago, I realized that with miniaturization of some of the equipment, some of the neurotechnology that we had experience with, and we had actually developed the first Bluetooth EEG device over 15 years ago. And I realized that what I do in my clinic is not scalable and it can't touch the masses. But what we can do is to actually put a version of what we do in our clinic in a portable, convenient model where it can still do brain training, it can still help with all these disorders, but can also serve to build resiliency, to reduce stress, to teach self-regulation, to improve cognition, things like attention, focus, memory. So that's when I started this neurotech startup, Vital Neuro, where, and I don't know how much we've talked about this last time we spoke, but basically it's a headphone that has sensors in it that pick up brain activity in real time. So you would wear it like a regular headphone, but while you're wearing it, it's monitoring your brain activity and it's sending it to our cloud-based algorithms and sends back sound and music and visuals to help you retrain, rewire your brain and learn how to self-regulate better and reduce anxiety, improve sleep, be better at meditating at a deeper level, to improve focus, to improve executive functions, and so on. So, and we use sound and music as a part of that, and we talked about music before. We have been using the type of music that we call smart music, meaning that the terminology is neuroresponsive music, meaning that based on your brain activity and this consciousness level or state of consciousness you're in, the music changes from moment to moment in response to your brain state. And it helps drive the brain to one of those desired states, which is, you know, in a way, one of the best ways that so far I've seen to be able to retrain and rewire the brain for improvement in the ways we talked about.
Yeah, that was, thank you so much also for showing that, because I was looking on the website and I was like, oh, how on earth does this work?
Yeah. It's very simple. You just put it on. There's an app. You start the app and you choose whether you want to go to sleep, you want to relax, you want to focus, or you want to work on improving executive functions. And there are different programs that you do to do that exercise.
Okay, thank you for showing us. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so what I experience myself, and that sounds simple maybe, but it's also listening to the birds already would be some kind of step. Yeah, when I go outside and don't have the headphones with the regular music on, but listen to nature and to the birds, because the birds has also really beautiful divine frequencies. And when you have good hearing system, and I'm singing for more than 30 years and playing piano. So for me, it's that I experience some of the sound files available would not be enough for me. So they have not the bandwidth. They are too shortened.
Yes, in nature, you get the full bandwidth, you get the full resolution. Anything else is a downgrade. Even though it's helpful, but it's a downgrade. And as interesting, you talk about birds, deep in our brain, from, you know, I guess from our ancestors to our own experience, because all of this genetically has been coded into our nervous system. Birds, you know, chirping in the morning are so stimulating and kind of stimulates your brain, wakes up your brain in a very gentle and a very meaningful way. And we do actually use nature sounds in some of our music recordings, very specifically, intentionally, and targeted to induce various brain states.
Yeah, wonderful that you're explaining that. It is actually also what I experience. And nature has a really highly intelligent system. It's just fascinating what, maybe you need to spiritually awaken, maybe not. So when I look at my mother with 85 years, so she also listens to the birds, also maybe not spiritually awakened, but just driven by the heart, because she loves them and she loves that sound. And many people do. So that's, I would say, the reason why we have in such apps and solutions also always the nature sounds, because as a human, we are driven and we find that as a kind of, feel it's like a safe space you can create. So my philosophy is that everybody does good if know how to create your own safe space. So you know what you need, how to calm down your mind and feel better. And there might be different kind of approaches for each individual.
Absolutely. But going back to, again, sound and music are so important to me. And I always say music is a neuromodulator. It's medicine.
Absolutely.
You know, the sounds of nature and appropriate, the right type of music, they charge our auditory cortex and they charge our brain. And music recruits and stimulates so many different networks in the brain. It's a topic of maybe another talk later, but
I would love to be. I love music as well. So since childhood. And so I made my dream come true and started to learn how to play piano only about 8 years or so ago. And I love my super concert piano. So because the sound, the frequency, and that's a difference. I also have an e-piano, but I look at this because it's standing here. So, but this Bechstein piano has such a beautiful sound, and I can feel it, the frequency, I can feel it. And here I also experience that when I play different kind of chords and things. So it opens really up our consciousness level. It brings me in an altered state of consciousness, and actually I can see things.
Absolutely. No, I understand.
So it's really fascinating experience.
I think music, again, the right frequencies, the right music, the right vibrations that resonate with our physiology in a very physical and psychoacoustic ways can actually, it's a shortcut in a way to drive the brain to different states of consciousness.
Yeah. That's why I also really encourage everybody. If you have a dream, if you really wanted to learn how to play whatever instrument, music instrument, please do it. Go for it. Don't wait until it's just feel that pleasure to really realize the dream. And sometimes it's really that, more or less little things, right? How we can bring pleasure and joy in our lives. And like you described it, also, a very healthy way of feeling better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe shortly about the book. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. I was asked by Alex and Rob, who are the authors of this book, to contribute to the neuroscience in the chapters about PTSD and brain injury, because we've had, over 20 years of experience, not only doing assessments, brain mapping, neuropsychological assessments on people with PTSD, but we've also done treatment. And many of these people that we've seen have gone back to life as if they never had the PTSD, or as if their brain injury is now cleared up. It's a lot of work, but it's very meaningful work. So because of our experience with that, they asked me to contribute to the book in terms of the neuroscience part. And I believe the book is a very important book because it's kind of like a field manual, as they say, for someone. This book was more targeted towards helping veterans with PTSD and brain injury, but I think in general, anyone with PTSD can benefit from reading this book because it describes the context, it describes the experience of someone with PTSD, all the challenges, but it also offers solutions. It offers ways people can have resources for treatment and for really a way to integrate back to society for veterans. But I would also say it's a great read for anyone who's interested in mental health, and especially PTSD and brain injury.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the title for our audience, Warrior to Civilian, Manual for the Hero's Journey. And unfortunately, we are creating so many more of these heroes or veterans. So with the wars and conflicts in the world, so it is necessary to have the solutions, talk about that. And I think we all would like to stop that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's better, definitely better not to create situations where then we need to do this kind of treatment. But since it is what it is today, unfortunately, there's a lot more of that in the world right now, to your point. There are ways to help improve and kind of introduce efficacy and efficiency to treatments and approaches to helping people, whether they're veterans or civilians with PTSD, because we also see a lot of people with childhood trauma, women who've had, all kinds of traumatic experiences in childhood. And the problem, and what's very difficult with PTSD, is that trauma is fresh in one's psyche and physiology, even 20, 30, 40 years after. It's as fresh as day one, unless it's properly treated.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, because there aren't enough resources, there aren't enough kind of efficacy models for treatment of PTSD and brain injury, people remain untreated or poorly treated, and they have to live with that nightmare for the rest of their lives. And we hope we can help change that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, that is also what I want to really talk about in that show, also with different kind of guests, because we have so much trauma in the world, and there must be more and more activities for healing in different ways, in the different ways to reach many people, so they have the chance to also live a fulfilled life with working on
Absolutely.
that. So coming to the closing, maybe is there one call to action you want to bring out into the world? So is there one really very important message for you looking at your area?
It's a good question. Well, let me just go back to what we know is a trigger to all kinds of psychiatric issues, and also what derails human development in terms of human consciousness is the fact that chronic stress, which is so prevalent in our society and lives today because of where we are in the evolution of human species, is we have a responsibility, in my opinion, to do self-care. Mm-hmm. And we have a responsibility to really be mindful of our own stress and our own reactions, because there are chain reactions that go along with that. And we often feel guilty in today's society, in the Western world. I'm sure it's not much different today in the Eastern world either, but we almost feel guilty and bad about self-care because we got to be productive, we got to do. So I guess if I want to leave you with one point is carve out time for self-care so you can work on your humanity and not be reactive to people around you, to the world, to create a better world. It's an internal work. It's not always, let's go out and change the world. It all starts here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's very, very important what everybody learns during the spiritual journey as within, so without. So like the Hermetic principles, that it really starts with us. And yeah, if you seek for love, find it in yourself and love yourself. And like you say, have that care for yourself. And that is really where it starts. So what are you doing yourself for your mental health? Is there some specific activity, practice? Do you meditate?
Yeah, I use this Vital Neuro, which integrates music and brain training, but I also do a lot of music listening. I'm fond of all kinds of music. There's all types of music that, people respond to music differently. I listen to a lot of ambient music. I listen to a lot of music to learn more about music composition, because we create our own music for therapeutic purposes. I listen to a lot of music from East, to name a few. One is the music of the late Ustad Alahi, who was a master musician whose instruments are now at the Metropolitan Museum of Arts here in New York. People like him whose music really elevates you, and it's like laser sharp to a specific brain state. So I do a lot of, I guess, my own meditation through sound and music, but also through creating music. I also meditate by engaging in art. I sculpt and do sculptures as a meditative practice. So it's a mix of, I would say, trying to be in very specific states through music and art and engaging in those creative activities. But also what I try to do, which obviously I'm not always successful in, is not to compartmentalize too much and say, here's the time to meditate, here's the time to be this, and then the rest of your life you forget about who you are. It needs to be integrated into your whole experience as a human being. And that's the difficult one to do, but we all strive to do that.
Yeah, that's why we have so many coaches and mentors. So it's also to support people to find their own way to routine. Beautiful, very, very beautiful. So last question. So is there anything you want to leave behind, something specific from your work? So is there another book or something you think about to bring all your wisdom in?
No, we're just very much engaged in doing whatever we can do to really deal with this global mental health crisis through the work we do locally at the Brain Resource Center here in New York, and through Vital Neuro. For Vital Neuro also, we have started some campaigns and some ways of using Vital Neuro and the music and mostly the brain training and music combination for preoperative and postoperative space for medical procedures, surgeries, which I believe is very important because it reduces the chance of additional need for sedatives and for painkillers and all kinds of complications like addiction that comes after that with a lot of people who get hooked on opiates, for instance. So we're doing some work within that realm that I'm very excited about as well.
Very interesting.
Integrating kind of this technology into kind of pre-op and post-op surgeries. Yeah. And then we're always doing some experiments in neuroscience at my lab here in New York, which I will update you about in the next. Some of them are on music and some of them are on other topics, and I'll update you about the upcoming results.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I feel we could really prolong for hours talking about that. It's just amazing, your work around mental health and well-being, and I really love your vision, and not only vision but actually your current work also to bring in more the frequency medicine, which is definitely part of the future medicine. So that is for sure what we need to integrate. So it's perfect contribution to better future healthcare. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me and creating this podcast to really reach people with important topics.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I take my energy field back, not to forget to close the cosmic powerhouse, and I wish you a wonderful day. Greetings to New York, and
thank you.
Hopefully we have another round to talk about this work. Thank you.
Thank you.